على آله وصحبه وسلم أما بعد. We're still on Imam Nawawi's 40 Hadith, and actually today is going to be the last class we'll have on wudu and everything related to wudu. In the next class we go straight into Salah, inshallah. But today we're going to speak about something, that I believe affects all of us when it comes to wudu, which is wiping the socks. And I believe it's a very important aspect of our wudu because of what we find ourselves in. We wear socks like throughout the year. Just maybe in the summer that sometimes we take off the socks, but then throughout the year we put on socks. So what is the ruling of putting on a socks with wudu? How do you do that? What's the ruling? What are some of the do's and don'ts? What are some of the rukhsa you have in terms of how do I call it? Permissions and discounts, waivers, that when you have, when you put on the socks, how do things go? So basically that's what we're going to talk about today. When you say al-khuf in the Arabic language, it means the leather socks made out of leather. For that, the scholars unanimously agree that when you perform wudu, you can what? You can wipe on the what? On the leather socks. So this is how it goes. Before you put on the socks, make sure you have full wudu. Okay? Before you put on the socks, make sure you have what? Full wudu. Then you put on the socks. Then after, if your wudu becomes invalidated, and then you're going to make a new wudu, you don't need to take off the socks. You only have to wipe on top of it. I hope you get it. So the condition that you must meet first and foremost is that the socks, your wudu must be intact before you put on the socks. I hope you get it. That's one. Number two, the socks should also cover the place that you will normally wash in wudu. So if your socks does not cover your ankle, then that socks is not a socks that you can wipe on wudu. I hope you get it. Now, the next thing is, we said that the socks must be something that is made of leather. What about the wool, the cotton that we have today? That, we're going to start with that first before we move into the criteria for because both have the same criteria. The scholars have three opinions concerning these modern day socks that we use in terms of made of cotton or wool or nylon. The first one is أنه لا يجوز المسح عليهما إلا أن يكون عليهما نعل جلد. That it is not appropriate, it is not allowed for you to wipe on the socks unless you already have a leather shoe or a leather boot on. So put on these socks, and then you put on a shoe or a boot that is made of leather. That's an opinion. And this opinion used to be an opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa, but he later left that opinion. It's also an opinion held by Imam Malik and Imam Shafi'i. So that's one. The second opinion is that it is allowed for you to wipe on your socks so long as they are thick and they can what? They cover the whole leg. So that's the second opinion. So light socks, they said no. The third opinion is so long as it's a sock that covers the foot, whether it is light or thick or heavy, it is allowed. And this is an opinion that even Uthaymin of modern day times, Ibn Uthaymin holds. It's a position held by Ibn Taymiyyah, and it's also a position by Allamat al-Shanqiti. And Shanqiti and Ibn Uthaymin are, modern day scholars. Uthaymin, I think, died in 2001 or so like that. So these are modern day scholars. They really understand what the context within which we live. And The evidence they have is the hadith of Mughirah bin Shu'bah, a companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, "Anna Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tawadda'a wa masaha ala al-jawrabayn wa na'alayn." That the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam performed wudu, and then he wiped on his socks, and then jawrabayn here means socks made of wool, cotton, or he wipes on that, and then he wiped on his boots too, on his shoes too. So this hadith also gives us, the legislation of wiping upon shoes too. Azraq ibn Qais, and this hadith is sahih, is found in Abu Dawood, is found in Tirmidhi, is found in Ahmad, and Imam al-Albani considered it as sahih. Another hadith is from Azraq ibn Qais. He said, "Ra'aytu Anas bin Malik ahdatha, فغسل وجهه ويديه ومسح على جوربين من صوف." He said, I saw Anas bin Malik, a companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His wudu got messed up, and then in performing wudu, I saw him wipe on his socks, which is made from wool. فَقُلْتُ أَتَمْسَحَ عَلَيْهِمَا, and I asked him, are you wiping on this? He's surprised. Are you wiping on a socks that is made from wool? قَالَ إِنَّهُمَا خُفَّانِ وَلَكِنْ مِنْ صُوفٍ. He said, these are also socks made from what? From suf, from wool. So this hadith is also found in Ad-Dulabi in his book called Al-Kuna, and Ahmad Shakir also considers as what? As-Sahih. We have evidence from 11 different Sahabi that wiped on what? On these socks that we have. Umar bin Khattab, Abdullah ibn Umar, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Anas, and the rest of them, all of them wipe on what? On the socks made from wool and what? And from cotton and other. So from these different narrations and these evidences, we see that yes, modern day socks that we have today, you can what? You can wipe on them when it comes to what? When it comes to wudu. As I said, the first criteria or the first legislation for wiping on the socks is that you must have wudu cleanly, totally. So for example, before you leave the home, you do your wudu, you put on your socks, and then you what? You put on your shoe, and then you go out. Day-in-day activities, your wudu becomes invalidated. You want to renew your wudu, then you don't take off the socks. You wipe on top of it.
You also mentioned shoes and boots.
Now,
So, can I wipe my boots or shoes without taking them off, or I have to take my shoes off then wipe on the socks?
good. So this hadith that we said, hadith of Mughirah bin Shu'bah, where he said he saw the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wipe on his boots and then his socks. The scholars have had two different understandings of the hadith. The first hadith is that Mughirah bin Shu'bah, first understanding of the hadith is that he saw the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He had the normal socks on, and then he had what? His shoe on. So he wiped on them. Or the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wore a shoe without the socks, and then he what? He wiped on top of it. And these two understandings are valid. So for example, you come to the masjid to pray or wherever you're traveling, and then you have your shoes on, and then you don't have a sock on, and you can wipe on top of it based on the understanding of this hadith.
So now, say I don't have my socks on.
Now,
I wear the shoes on.
now.
So now I am coming to the masjid. So I take off my
Shoes, yes.
to still
Good. Taking off your shoe or taking off your sock does not invalidate your wudu. Because there's a hadith of Imam Ali, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, where he performed wudu, he wiped on his shoes. When he came to do salah, he took off the shoes and put them aside, and then he prayed like that. You get it? So when you take off your shoe or you take off your sock after wiping on top of it, it doesn't invalidate the wudu. What invalidates the wudu are the things that we mentioned, in some classes behind, far back. Now,
That brings to me another two questions. One question, of course, so like once wudu was broken and I do the wudu again, wiping the socks, and I take them off or the shoes and I put them back on, so I'm still in the state of wudu.
you are still in the state of wudu.
Okay, so how many hours?
Good, that will come.
Okay, so another one. Is it necessary to take off the shoes to pray, or I can still pray while keeping my...
Yes, so we have a hadith from Abu Dawood that said you can what? You can pray in your shoes. But the problem is that, uncle, if you bring your shoes here, we'll kick you out. But if you are outside, yes, you can do that. Muddatu mas'al khuffayn. How long can I wipe on my socks? If you are resident in Harvard Town, in your everyday movement, or you are in Philadelphia, you're not on a travel, you are in your everyday movement, is 24 hours. Yawmun wa layla. And then we'll come and talk about what time does it start from. I hope you get it. If we say 24 hours, Yawmun wa layla, when does it begin? When does it end? We'll come and talk about that. So if you are in Harvard Town like this, your everyday movements, then it's what? It's 24 hours. You can wipe on what? On the socks. The moment you hit that 24-hour mark, you'll have to take it off. And then what? In doing wudu again, you wash what? The feet before you put the socks back on, and then you have another what? Another 24 hours.
So when I wipe only the top part.
I'll come to that. Yes, that's one. But then if you are traveling, you have 3 days. So you're traveling, maybe you go for a Muna convention, maybe overseas, or you go for a business trip, for example. You travel to go see family, maybe in New York. So long as you are traveling, in those 3 days, you can what? You can continue to wipe your socks, even if you what? Your wudu becomes invalidated, you wipe your socks for those 3 days. We'll come and see which stuff will the only time you will take off the socks within the 3 days is when you have janaba, which is, you have emission as a male. That is the only time that within those 3 days, you cannot continue to wear the socks. I hope we get it. So in 3 days, you continue to wear the socks even if you go to the toilet, even if you urinate, even if you sleep, even if you do all those things. The only thing is if you have sexual relations or you sleep and then you see yourself in a dream whereby you emit semen, then that is the only time that you will have to take off the socks and what? And, what do you call it? And then you do a new wudu. So what if I'm traveling for more than 3 days? It means that after every 3 days, you take it off. You what? You do your normal wudu, then you put it back on. So let's say you're traveling for a month. So long as you are a visitor, after every 3 days, you what? You take it off, and then you what? You put it back on. You take it off, you put it back on.
Is it also considered to do it, to practice it, as a sunnah?
It's a sunnah, and you get the reward for doing that. It's a sunnah. You get the reward for doing that. If you choose not to, you don't have no blame. So for example, if you choose to take off your socks to wash your feet every wudu, fine, that's up to you. There is no sin. Someone will come and say, no, you are doing bid'ah. No, it's not bid'ah. Because washing the feet in itself is what? Is the original what form of wudu. The socks that we put on, we were just given a waiver by the Almighty Allah through the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if someone decides not to take it a waiver, we won't blame the person that, why didn't you? No, we didn't do that. We won't do that. But if you decide to accept the waiver of the Almighty Allah, you get rewarded for it. You get rewarded for it. There is hadith of Ali bin Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu where he said, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم جعل ثلاثة أيام ولياليهن للمسافر. that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam stipulated 3 days and 3 nights for the person who is traveling, وَيَوْمًا وَلَيْلَةٍ لِلْمُقِيمِ, and then a day and a night for the person who is what? Who is a resident. Hadith of Auf ibn Malik al-Ashja'i said, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أمر بالمس على الخفين في غزوة تبوك 3 أيام ولياليهن للمسافر ويوم وليلة للمقيم. He said at the battle of Tabuk, the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم legislated that if you are traveling, you are allowed to wipe on your socks 3 days and 3 nights. But then if you are someone who is a resident, is 1 day and 1 night, meaning a 24-hour cycle. There's also a hadith of Safwan ibn Usal where he said, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يأمرنا إذا كنا سفرا ألا ننزع خفافنا 3 أيام ولياليهن إلا من جنابة لكن من غائط وبول ونوم. He said the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم ordered us that anytime we are traveling, we should not take off our socks for 3 days and 3 nights except from janaba. If janaba affects us, then there's a need for ghusl, so we have to take off those socks. He said whether we went to toilet, whether we urinated, or whether we slept, we had the waiver from the Sharia that we can wipe on our socks. But then Imam Malik, disagrees with this position. It's also another statement by Imam Shafi'i, an old statement from Imam Shafi'i, that they do not see a specific time frame for the wiping of the socks. He said the person should just maintain his socks on. The only time the person who's going to take off the socks on is when he has janaba. But then if there's anything else, you should just continue with his socks. But then the position that they held is from a very weak hadith. The hadith is found in Sunan Abu Dawood, and he said, Ubay ibn Umara said, قلت يا رسول الله أمسح على الخفين. He said, is it okay for us to wipe on our socks? قال نعم. And the Prophet said, yes. قلت يوما. He said, one day. قال يوما. And the Prophet said, yes, one day. قلت ويومين. And I said, Ya Rasulullah, 2 more days? قال يومين. He said, yes, it's okay for 2 more days. قلت وثلاثة. He said, 3 more days. And the Prophet said, وما شئت. And any more days that you want. But this hadith is a weak hadith. This hadith is a weak hadith. And so long as we have, authentic hadith that stipulate 3 days and 3 nights for someone who is traveling, and 1 day and 1 night for the person who stays home, then that is enough for us. When does it begin? When does wiping the socks begin? Does it begin from Fajr? Does it begin from Zuhur? Does it begin from Asr? The scholars have had some statements on that. The first one is that يَبْدَأْ مِنْ أَوَّلِ حَدَثٍ بَعْدَ اللُّبْسِ. He said it begins from the first invalidation of the wudu. So for example, after Fajr, you're going to work, right? Or before Fajr, you prepare yourself, you take your bath, you take your wudu, you put on your socks, you put on your clothing, whatever. You come to the masjid for what? For Fajr. After Fajr, you drive your car, you go to your workplace, you are there until Zuhr. Your wudu didn't invalidate, it wasn't invalidated. And then you pray Zuhr with that same wudu. Then the wudu becomes invalidated. Let's say after Dhuhr. That is when the 24 hours begin for you. You understand? So after the invalidation of the wudu, not from the first start of the wudu. I hope you see the difference. Not when you did the first wudu, then you put on your socks. No, not then. After that wudu becomes invalidated, and then you do a new wudu that you're going to wipe on that socks, that is when you begin what? You begin your counting. So that's one opinion. The second opinion, and this opinion is opinion held by Sufyan al-Thawri, Imam al-Shafi'i, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, And this is a position that they hold. The second opinion is that from the first wudu, as we said. So the moment you put on the socks, that's when it begins. So you put on the socks after Fajr, that's it, that's when you begin. You have until what? The next Fajr to what? To take it off and put on what? And do the wudu and put on what? The socks again. So let's do it according. So the first opinion is when you put on the socks the first time at Fajr, for example. The second opinion is said no. After that first wudu becomes invalidated and then you what? You start a new wudu, that's when you begin. So if you had the wudu from Fajr and then it was only after Dhuhr that the wudu became invalidated, then that's when you start what? You start counting. Now,
so after you invalidate the wudu, you have to take a full wudu or you can start wiping yourself?
so you take the full wudu, but then when you get to the feet, you don't wash the feet, you wipe the socks. So for example, I have my wudu from home, I did my wudu, everything, I put on the socks. I'm coming to the masjid, let's say for Asr, for example. So I get to the car park, I park, and then I started feeling, I need to use the toilet. So I go, I use the toilet. Now, if I'm going to do a wudu, I'm not going to take off the socks. I do the wudu fully from A. When I get to the feet, I only wipe the socks. I don't take off the socks. So that's how you do it.
So that will be the start of the 24 hours.
That will be the start of the 24 hours. The third position is, this is very, very logic. He said, so long as it says 24 hours for someone who is a resident, within 24 hours, how many salah do we have? 5. So it's only for 5 salats. So you wipe it for only 5 salah, not 6 salah, 5 salah. And so by extension, for someone who is 3 days and 3 nights, how many salah? 15 salah. So this is the third the opinion. The fourth opinion is that he can begin wiping on the socks right after his first wudu is what? Is messed up. Whether he has wiped on it or not, this is where it begins for him. Do you know what it means? What it means is that if I do my normal wudu, and even if I don't put on a socks on, then my wudu becomes invalidated. That is when I begin my what? That's when I begin counting my wiping on the socks. Or I put on the socks and my wudu becomes invalidated. That is when I begin wiping my socks. So in this position is that the invalidation of your first wudu is what is the starting point, irrespective of whether you have a socks on or not. You see the difference between that and the first opinion? The first opinion is that your invalidation begins after you put on what? The socks. But this one is counting is whether you put on the socks or not. So long as the first wudu you had in the day, its first invalidation, that is when you begin what? Wiping on the socks. And then the fifth one is that you what? Right after the first one, you begin what? Counting. So you can see that the predominant opinion is right after what? The first invalidation of your wudu. That's when you start counting your 24 hours. And I believe we are in times whereby we need this, right? Because the weather is getting cold. So it's very relevant for us. We said if someone is traveling 3 days, right? And if some person is a resident is 1 day. Let's say you just get an impromptu message that you need to go to New York. You're going to travel. From when do you start counting? You have 3 days, right? Does that 1 day that you have, is it going to be part of the 3 days or you start counting onwards? When you travel. So you already have that 1 day already. because you're home, and then you get that impromptu what? Travel that you need to travel, then you get what? You get your 3 days extra. So it becomes 4 days. You get a bonus for that. What if I'm traveling for 3 days? Or let's say I'm traveling. I have the intention of going to New York to spend 2 days, for example. So in going, I'm going to have 3 days, right? So I hit the 95, I get to George Washington Bridge, and I receive a phone call that, listen, there's something that is needed back home, you have to come back. And then you turn back. Did it happen before? And then you have to turn back. Now, when you are coming back, do you have 3 days or 1 day? You have 1 day. Because you are coming back to what? To residence. I hope we get it. Let's even say you spent 1 night in New York, and you are preparing to go to another program or something like that. You had a call. So in returning back, it is cut short to what? To the 1 day. But then in traveling, you are what? You have the extension of what? Of 3 days. May Almighty Allah safeguard us. As we said, the socks must cover the foot, ankle, and then also you must put it on from the beginning that you have what? You have tahara. So sometimes you see that we have some socks that what? That do not cover the ankle. It is not haram to wear them, but anytime you're going to perform wudu, you have to take them off to wash the whole feet and then put them back on. So if you have those kind of, these modern times are so wonderful. Sometimes I see people wear shoes and I think they don't have any socks. They take off their shoes and I see the socks is like, it's underground socks. It looks, it's not weird, but I think I've never worn that before, not because I don't like it, but that's not how I grew up. My mother made sure that my socks is up here and stuff like that. So, but I imagine that it's going to be very comfortable that, because when you put your feet in a shoe without socks, I don't know with other people, but for me, it's a bit uncomfortable. But then for that, it's a secret, weapon that you put on and stuff like that. So, but something like that, you don't wipe on them. You have to take it off and wash the feet and then put the sock back on. How do you wipe? It is this. Yes, this. Not this. You don't wipe on top and the bottom. It's only on top that you wipe. Because of the hadith of Ali radiallahu anhu, where he said, if the religion is by our just logic, then wiping the socks will be underneath and not on top. Let me ask you, between the top and the down, which one gets dirty early? The bottom. Why is that we don't wipe the bottom, we wipe on top? It's because the deen is not logic. Because logically, you are supposed to, if you're going to go by logic, you wipe what? Underneath, the bottom. But then the legislation is what? You wipe what? On top. Another example, if there's no water, we do tayammum, right? We do dust to wipe on our body. We are messing up the body. It's because the deen is not what? It's not logic. So we wipe on top, not both. What if I wipe both? It doesn't invalidate your wudu. Because at least you wiped on top. At least you did what? You did the main thing. But it is wrong for you to wipe what? On both. What if I wipe the bottom, I don't wipe on top? The wudu is not valid. The wudu is deficient. You have a deficit in the what? In the wudu.
Is it matter usually, so I use right hand, but
No.
sometimes while you are standing in a moving behind,
No.
right, you need to hold something.
No.
Is it okay if I wipe my,
With your left hand.
with the right and another with the left hand?
No problem. Because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ prefers using his right hand for what? For this stuff. But then if it becomes, a difficulty to use the right hand, then use the left hand. Because, for example, if you might use, because maybe you might be right-handed, you need to grab something with the right hand firmly before you can what? You can do that. There's no problem.
Especially in the plane, like you are traveling.
Yeah. Yes, especially when if you are not careful, you hit something in the washroom and you stay there. Now,
So, you know, it's one day at home and 3 days when you travel. But what if you change socks? Does it reset?
there's no reset. The reset happens when the 24 hours count what? Comes up. If the socks becomes dirty and then you take it off and then you put a new sock on, it's like the old sock you have on. You understand? So let's say, for example, the sock gets messed up. You take it off. As you remember, we said that taking off the sock does not invalidate the wudu. The wudu still what? Still remains. So when your sock gets messed up and then you take off the socks to change the socks, that's a different thing altogether. The wudu still continues within the 3-day and 3-night cycle. Yes, you can still wipe on the new sock as well. But then the necessitation of wiping on a new sock doesn't arise. The fact that you have a new sock on. Okay, now.
So, by wiping on socks, you wipe like same time, like this or one time?
So you start with the right and then you go to the left. No, there's no one time. Because in wudu, don't forget that you wash the right leg first before you what? You wash the left leg. And it is not 3 times, it's once. The fact that you wash your feet 3 times doesn't mean you wipe on it 3 times. No, it's once. You wipe on it once, you wipe on it once, you are done. Now.
So, if I make a wudu and come to prayer,
Now.
then I go home, like, you know, I take my socks off,
Now.
and go to the bathroom,
Now.
put the socks back on, to finish.
Your wudu is still valid because the reasons for the invalidation of wudu has not been met. Eh? What did he do in the bathroom? He said he just went to the bathroom. He didn't tell him what he did in the bathroom. What did he do in the bathroom? Okay, so long that invalidates the wudu. Okay? That invalidates the wudu. So for example, if you go to the Arman, get up and sit down. I like the answer. What do you do in the bathroom? I like the answer. What do you do in the bathroom? We do what we do in the bathroom. It's like, and thank you very much for that reminder. You need help with something? You sure?
We know. We've been wondering where you've been.
So his question is, I do wudu. Normally, I put my sock on. I come to the masjid. I pray, maybe for Maghrib. I need to go back home and then to do something, I go back home. And let's say, for example, I don't even take off my socks. I go into the washroom. I do what we normally do in the washroom. The wudu is invalidated. What do? I wipe on the socks and come out. But if I take off the socks, then after taking off the socks, I invalidate the wudu, then I'll have to do the wudu all over again. Let's note the difference. Yes.
If I make a wudu and put the socks on, right? Then I pray, then I go home, take my socks off,
Now.
right?
Now.
Still I have,
Still you have wudu. You do wudu, for example, let's say you do wudu normally, okay? You put the socks on. You do your everyday activity. Then that wudu becomes invalidated. For example, let me come. That wudu becomes invalidated. And then you do a new wudu that allows you to wipe on the socks. Right? Now you have the wudu that has what? The wiping on the socks on. Right? Now if you take off that socks, that wudu is still valid.
I heard one of the Muslim he says like after you make a wudu, just wipe it on. After you wipe it, you take it off, then you have to make a wudu.
I don't know why he said that, but the hadith are very clear that if someone does wudu, and the hadith is very clear. The Prophet Muhammad, the brother wanted to take off the socks for the Prophet Muhammad. He said, لا تنزعهما لقد أدخلتهما طاهرتين. He said, no, don't take them off because I have what? They were clean when I put them on. Meaning I had wudu when I put them on. So that's one. Number two, Ali radiallahu anhu wiped on his socks. When he came to pray, he took off the socks and then he prayed like that. So that does not invalidate the wudu from what? From these athar that what we have. I hope that answers the question. So for example, if you do wudu as we said normally, before you put on the socks, the condition is that you must have what? You must have wudu. Then you put on what? The socks. Then afterwards, that wudu becomes invalidated. The fact that you put on the socks after you had full wudu allows you to what? To wipe on that socks. So this is going to be your second wudu. So the first wudu is wudu of washing the legs. That you put on the socks. The second wudu is wudu of what? Of wiping the feet, no washing. Now, if you take off your socks after the second wudu, the wudu is still valid. The wudu is still valid. The only time the wudu is going to be invalid is if you visit there. That is when the wudu becomes what? Invalid.
If someone wipes their feet more than once,
It doesn't invalidate the wudu. It doesn't invalidate. It's just that the person just, did something extra that he's not supposed to do. It's just one time. One time. Now.
Now, when you take off the socks
Mm-hmm.
and you pray,
Now.
and then you put back on the socks,
Now.
then your wudu is invalidated.
No.
No, no. If your
Okay. Yes.
you have to do wudu again,
Now.
you can wipe on the socks.
Now. No. You wipe on the socks. I understand your question. You do your now we have this. Let's say you have the socks on now, right? And then your feet a bit uncomfortable, so you take off the socks, and then you come and then you pray. After praying, you put on the socks back. Then your wudu becomes invalidated. Do you wipe on the socks? Yes, you wipe on the socks because at the time that you put on the socks, did you have wudu or not? You had wudu. So the time that you can wipe on the socks is so long as you put on the socks at the time that you had full wudu, then afterwards your wudu becomes invalidated. That is, you are allowed to wipe on the socks. But then, if you put on the socks after your wudu is invalidated, then in doing a new wudu, you have to take off the socks and wash the legs. So the point here is, the cheat code is have the wudu before you put on the socks.
Yeah, his logic was like, after you wipe it, you take it off, so socks is not attached to your body.
Mm-hmm.
So it said this is the reason why he's saying
No, that's why we said the deen doesn't work with your logic. The deen works with what? With the athar, with the what? With the established hadith that we have. If the hadith is established, then your logic, we are sorry. We still respect you, but we put the logic aside. Now,
so
Uncle.
it's better when we are traveling and it's troublesome to wash the feet. It's better to keep the socks on.
Keep the socks on.
You don't know when.
For 3 days and 3 nights, just keep the socks on. Even afterwards, even not even that. Me, even in normal day activities, want to be smart about it. In the morning, I do my wudu, I put the socks on. It keeps me like that for the next 24 hours. Now, Uncle.
I think this is the conclusion that if you wudu in belly and then you take the socks off somehow, that means you have to start from the beginning, from the feet, washing your.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, as he said, if your wudu is invalid before you put on the socks, then if you're going to do a new wudu, you have to take off the socks. But then if your wudu is valid when you put on the socks, at the time that you're putting on the socks, you had intact, full wudu, then if that wudu becomes invalidated, you can what? You can wipe on the socks. Now.
So we wipe on the socks when the socks have a little hole.
No. The socks must cover the whole feet. If you have these modern day, socks whereby I don't know if, they poke holes in the socks, I don't know. So long as it doesn't cover the whole feet, then it's what? It doesn't qualify for a socks that you wipe on. it has to be up to the ankle. So something like this. If you also want to be a referee, that's fine. You pull it up there, that's your problem. What are some of the things that invalidate wiping the socks? Number one, janaba. Janaba is the only time, as we said in earlier hadith, that will cause you to what? To take off the socks. But then if you just go to the toilet, you don't need to take off the socks. Your new wudu is wiping out on the socks. So the first one is what? Is janaba. Or if our sister, goes through her menstrual cycle, she has to take it off to do her ghusl, or she has postpartum bleeding after she gives birth. Number two is when the time frame stipulated for the wiping of the socks comes to an end. So for someone who is a resident, 24-hour cycle comes to an end, you take it off. And what? And then do a new wudu. Even if that original wudu is still valid. You don't have to what? To wipe on the socks now. And then the third one is if your wudu is not valid before you put the socks on, then you have to take off the socks and then what? You wash your feet and then have a full socks. At-tanbih. This is just a caution. بطلان المسح لا يعني انتقاد الوضوء. The fact that you are no longer allowed to wipe on the socks doesn't mean that your wudu is invalid. Understand? So let's say your 24-hour cycle comes to an end. But by the time that the 24-hour cycle comes to an end, you still have valid wudu. You can still pray with that wudu, but then the only thing is that when you're going to do a new wudu, you have to take off the socks and what? And wash the feet, and then you start another cycle. You get it? So let's say, as we said, you put on the sock as what? As a resident from Dhuhr. Or let's say you started yesterday, Maghrib. So up to 24 hours, this Maghrib that you're going to pray now, if you still have the wudu, fine. But if you're going to do a new wudu, when that wudu becomes invalidated, if you're going to do a new wudu, you'll have to take off the socks and wash the feet and put it on for another what? Another 24-hour cycle.
So we can go up to like more than 24 hours taking.
How?
So let's say
I get it. But then you can go, but then if you're going to do a new wudu, then you have to take it off. So technically you can go beyond the 24-hour cycle if you are like someone like me who sometimes I keep wudu for like 3 days or 4 days. It's funny, we have, that we have big sheikhs in Africa that they can keep wudu for a week. And they're big, they can keep wudu for 3 days and stuff like that. I say, I don't want this kind of karama. I don't want it. Now, now, now. Mm-hmm. Now, so for example, if you forget to wash, a major part of wudu. So don't forget, when we're doing the wudu class, we said there are major compulsory arkan part of wudu. And then we have what? We have the lesser, stronger parts of the wudu. For the lesser parts of wudu, if you forget any of them, no matter whenever you forget about them, you come back, you just do that alone. But then if you forget, let's say the face, and then you remember later, if it is a short period of time, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you go back and then you start from where you missed and redo the rest that followed. But then if it's like 45 minutes and you've already done a maghrib with it or a dhuhr with it, the wudu and the salah itself is what? Is invalid. So you go and remake that wudu and then you remake that salah that you did that wudu. But if you're a big sheikh who keeps one wudu for 4 salats, then you'll have to what? Redo those 4 salawats. What's oh no? You're getting more reward. You get more reward. Allah knows best. Quickly. You can wipe on shoes. We saw those ahadith. Now, wiping on the kufi. Can I do wudu and wipe on the kufi? Never. Take it off. That's it. You're done. Bring it back on. Can I wipe on my imama, a turban? Yes. Because of the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ that came on that I can what? We can wipe on what? On our turbans. Now, we said that for you to wipe on the socks, you must have full wudu. Then you put on the socks. Then afterwards, you can wipe on the what? On the socks. What about imama? That condition is not applicable. Right from the beginning, you what? You wipe on the imama. Especially those of us who come from, desert areas. There's some imama, if you put it on, man, it takes you like 3 days before you can pull it out. Because of how you what? You put it on, you put it on, you put it on. So for that, no, you don't have to what? You don't have to what? There's a hadith of Amr ibn Umayyah al-Dumari. قال رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم مسح على الخفين والعمامة. And this hadith is in Bukhari. He said, I saw the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, wipe on his socks and on his what? On his turban. ومثله عن المغيرة بن شعبة. The same hadith is narrated by Mughirah bin Shu'bah. Bilal also said, رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم مسح على الخفين والخمار. He said, I saw the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam wipe on his socks and then his khimar. Khimar here means the scarf that the women wear. That's what it means linguistically. But then within this, it means his what? His what? His imama. His what? His turban. His turban. Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik and Imam Shafi'i, they say that a person is not allowed to only wipe on the imama. You try as much as possible to wipe on the what? On the forehead, somewhere like that here. So if you can push back. But then that again, the rest of the scholars said no. So long as the Prophet Muhammad didn't do that, you must what? Wipe on the imama is enough. For them, they were like, it's masuras, wipe the head. So in wiping the head, so then the gymnastics come in. But then wiping on top of their imama is what is allowed. Can a woman wipe on her what? On her hijab? If she fears that there are men around that is going to expose her aura, then she can wipe on top of it. But then there's a hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha where she said, where it is reported that she used to just put her hands under her, her hijab to wipe on her head. It is reported, but then we've not found, the book in which you have that hadith. So long as we don't have that, yes, a woman can what? Can do that. Because Salama, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad used to what? Used to wipe on her what? On her khimar. Now,
Can do it or cannot?
she can do it without the tea. She can do it. Yes, she can. She can do that. If she fears fitna of the men, but if there are no men there around, she can. And it's something that she can just take it off easily and then wipe on her head and put no problem. But if not, she can wipe on her head.
Still like a woman is traveling, so she's in the bus, she went to the bus.
No. She should just wipe on her head and that's it.
It's sometimes it's problematic to
Yeah. Yes, pin there. Sometimes it's 10 pins for the woman. It doesn't follow the socks rule. So the difference between the wiping on the imama and the socks is that for the socks, you must make sure you have full wudu before you put the socks on. Then afterwards, if that wudu is invalidated, then you can wipe on the socks. But for the imama, from the get-go, you can what? You can put on the imama. And the socks has 24 hours for a resident and 3 days for a traveler. The imama doesn't have that. It doesn't have any stipulated time. Now, what about wiping on, what do you call them? Eh? No, not sleeves. For sleeves, you have to take it off and then, these slings that when someone breaks his arm, Someone breaks their hand, it is called jabira. It also falls within what? The frame of what? Of a imama. So if someone has, plaster, he can what? He can wipe on it. Or someone has a protective boot on, they can wipe on that protective boot because they have darura. They have darura. And it doesn't follow the rule of what? Of wiping the socks. It doesn't follow the rule of what? Of wiping the socks. And it doesn't have a time frame too for that. So long as the person has that, then the person can what? Can wipe on it. So long as he has it on till the time whereby, the Almighty Allah will grant him health for that, thing to be taken off. Now, even if the person has ghusl or it has janaba, he's what? Encouraged to what? To wipe that on. And let me even state this. If someone has a skin disease, if using water wudu for that skin disease is going to exacerbate that, doing wudu becomes even haram for him. He has to use what? Tayammum. He shouldn't say, Wallahi me, I'm a mu'min. No, this is not iman. This is not iman. Because if you use water, it's going to what? It's going to kill you. And there's hadith on that. There's a companion who they went to war. And then he was struck on his head. He was bleeding. They did whatever they could to just, help him. And then at night, he had nocturnal emissions. So when he woke up, he asked two of the Sahaba that this is the situation I'm in. Can I do tayammum? They said no. So long as there's water, you must bath. The guy bathed, water entered into his wound, and then he died. And when the Prophet Muhammad was told, he said, قَتَلُوهُ قَتَلَهُمُ اللَّهُ. They've killed him, may the Almighty Allah curse them. هَلَّا يَسْأَلُوا إِلَّمْ يَعْلَمُوا. Why didn't they ask if they didn't know? So, if it's going to lead to your death, it's going to lead to the worsening of the situation, then the water is put aside and then you do what? You do tayammum because that's best. If you say, my iman is here, no, then that is not iman. Because iman at that time is what? Is doing tayammum. This time around, it's ignorance, it's not iman. No, your father is before you.
So when it comes to a sick person or injured person,
No.
that being in the state of wudu, when it comes to wiping, it does not apply.
It doesn't apply.
Because the person can be injured or become sick when
Yes.
he's not in the state of wudu.
Yes.
But still he can wipe it off.
Yes, you can. Now you can come in. Decades later.
Wrestling in high school,
Ah?
I had ringworm.
MashaAllah. This guy, I need you to come. I need to come so that you teach me wrestling.
So I had a ringworm on my arm,
No.
type of disease that's common,
No.
from the mats and stuff. And when I would put water on it, it would get worse.
Now.
But I didn't know what to do at the time, so I used to pour small bits, the tiniest bit of water,
Okay.
and it would get a little worse.
Now.
But overall, after a month or so, it got better.
Now.
But it was getting worse because
Now, of the water.
Should I have done the tayammum?
So what you could have done there is, if you kind of have something to cover the place with, maybe get a napkin or something, cover the place with and then tie it. And then when you're doing wudu, you just wipe on it. And then that's it. You go and do your salah. Because of that only portion, we wouldn't say go do tayammum to the rest of the body. Okay? So that place gets that special attention of what? You just cover it up. And then you what? So maybe even your sleeve, the sleeve of your shirt, it becomes your jawrab then. It becomes what? The protective cover for that place. You wipe on that sleeve, but then you wash the different parts of the body that deserve to be washed in the wudu.
Only one portion, this portion of my
Yes.
arm. So would I have to roll back the sleeve and wet this part of it?
If wetting this part is going to trickle down to that place, no. Cover the whole place. Save the whole place. Just wipe on top of it with, water on the sleeve, in and out. That's it. Don't take the chances with that. The deen is a deen of yusr. It's a deen of what? Of ease. Not a ease, or the religion of what? Of difficulty. Now, let's pause here and then we'll take questions because I think we've come to the end of the class. Inshallah. So then we take questions and then at 8:50 we can have, our adhan, inshallah.